I stood by my wife's casket, numb with grief, staring at the woman I had loved for 43 years. Everything about that moment felt wrong. Her dress, the navy blue one she'd always said was too fancy for Elk Hollow. Her hair, styled in a way Louise never would have approved. Even the silence, too perfect, too rehearsed, lacking the gentle whispers and soft sobs that should accompany. Genuine loss. That's when I heard it, a whisper barely audible from somewhere behind me. "That's not her in there." My heart skipped a beat. I turned slowly, scanning the faces of mourners dressed in black. Most were avoiding my gaze, as people tend to do around the recently bereaved. The funeral home smelled of lilies and that artificial scent they spray to mask the chemicals. Louise would have hated it. She always said she wanted to be buried with sprigs of lavender from our garden. "Did someone say something?" I asked, my voice cracking. The small crowd shifted uncomfortably. My sons, Ethan and Gavin, moved closer to me, flanking me like sentries. "Dad, you should sit down," Ethan said, his hand firm on my shoulder. At 39, he had my build, but his mother's dark eyes. Eyes. That wouldn't meet mine now. "I heard someone," I insisted, shrugging off his touch. Gavin, younger by 3 years, but somehow always seeming older, exchanged a look with his brother. "It's the stress, Dad. Dr. Whitman said you might experience confusion." I hadn't experienced a moment of confusion in my 69 years, not even when they told me Louise had fallen down our stairs. The same. Stairs she'd navigated safely for decades. Not even when they insisted on a closed casket because the injuries were too severe. But now, standing in Carson's funeral home with my sons hovering like vultures, something inside me stirred, something that felt like doubt. The service dragged on. Pastor Miller spoke of Louise's kindness, her 30 years as Elk Hollow's most beloved school librarian, her apple pies that won the county fair 3 years running. But he spoke like a man reading from notes provided by someone else. The Louise he described was a stranger wearing my wife's accomplishments. After the final prayer, people filed past me with mumbled condolences. I scanned each face, looking for the source of that whisper. As the crowd thinned, I noticed a woman I didn't recognize, lingering by the back row, pale, thin, maybe in her 50s, with anxious eyes that kept darting to my sons and then back to me. I made my way toward her, but Ethan intercepted me. "The cars are waiting, Dad. We should head to the cemetery." "Just a minute," I said, trying to step around him. Gavin appeared at my other side. "Everyone's waiting. We can't delay the procession." I looked over there, shoulders at the woman, who was now edging toward the exit. Our eyes met briefly. Hers widened with what looked like recognition, or fear. At the cemetery, I barely registered the final prayers. The gleaming mahogany casket, too ornate for Louise's simple tastes, was lowered into the ground. I tossed a handful of dirt, feeling nothing but the growing weight of something being terribly wrong. The reception was held at our house, the craftsman-style home Louise and I had saved for 20 years to buy. Our pride and joy, with its wraparound porch and the maple tree we'd planted when we first moved in. Now it felt like a stage set, with people moving through it like actors playing the role of mourners. I watched my sons working the room. Ethan, the successful investment banker from Atlanta, speaking in hushed tones with my neighbor Bill about getting Dad's affairs in order. Gavin, the lawyer, nodding solemnly as elderly Mrs. Patterson from church asked about poor Harold's plans now. I slipped away to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. The man looking back at me seemed hollowed out, grey hair disheveled, blue eyes bloodshot, wrinkles deepened by 5 days of hell. "Get a grip, Harold," I whispered to myself. "Louise wouldn't want you falling apart." A knock on the door startled me. "Mr. Bennett?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. "Mr. Bennett, I need to speak with you, urgently." I opened the door to find the pale woman from the funeral. Up close, I could see she was younger than I'd first thought, maybe early 40s, with premature streaks of grey in her brown hair. "Who are you?" I asked. "My name is Mara Fields. I'm a hospice nurse. I knew your wife's cousin." She glanced nervously down the hallway. "Please, I don't have much time. Your sons will notice I'm here." "What do you want?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "That wasn't your wife in that casket today." The words hit me like a physical blow. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself. "What are you talking about?" "Your sons, Ethan and Gavin, they set this up. All of it." Her eyes welled with tears. I saw Louise 3 days after she supposedly died. She was alive, Mr. Bennet. Confused, sedated, but alive. The room seemed to tilt around me. That's impossible. There was a death certificate. The funeral was for someone else. She pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. This is my number. Call me when you can talk freely, but be careful who sees you do it. Before I could respond, heavy footsteps approached from the living room. There you are, Dad. Gavin's voice carried down the hallway. People are asking for you. Mara slipped past me and hurried toward the back door as Gavin rounded the corner. Who was that? He asked, frowning. I pocketed the paper. Just someone offering condolences. Gavin studied my face. You look terrible. Why don't you lie down? Ethan and I can handle things here. I'm fine, I said, though nothing was fine. Nothing had been fine since the moment they told me Louise was dead. As I moved back to the crowded living room, I felt the weight of eyes on me. My son's eyes, calculating and cold in a way I'd never noticed before. Or maybe I had noticed, but hadn't wanted to see. Louise's last words to me before I left for work that final morning echoed in my mind. Promise me something, Harold. If anything ever seems off, don't trust what you see, promise me. At the time, I'd laughed it off as one of her superstitious moments. Now those words pounded in. My head like a warning bell I'd failed to heed. I looked around at our home, filled with strangers eating casseroles on our good plates, and at my sons, who suddenly seemed like strangers too. If Louise wasn't in that casket, where was she? And why would my own flesh and blood lie about her death? My world had not just shattered when Louise died. It had been replaced by something unrecognizable, a nightmare masquerading as reality, with my sons as architects of my confusion. That night, after everyone had gone and my sons had retired to their old bedrooms, I sat alone in the kitchen, clutching the piece of paper with Mara's number. The house creaked and settled around me, familiar sounds that had once brought comfort. Now they seemed like whispers of a truth too terrible to face. But face it I would, for Louise. Dawn broke over Elk Hollow, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that Louise would have appreciated. She'd always been the early riser between us, often up before the sun to savor what she called the quiet hours. I hadn't slept at all, my mind racing with possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. I made coffee, the ritual movements providing a fragile sense of normalcy. The phone number Mara had given me burned in my pocket. I needed to call her, but not from the house, not with Ethan and Gavin upstairs. The floorboards above me creaked. Someone was awake. I grabbed my jacket and car keys, scribbled a note about needing air, and slipped out the back door before either of my sons could intercept me. My 2008 Ford pickup started with a familiar rumble. I backed out of the driveway, past Ethan's sleek BMW and Gavin's Audi, symbols of the success they'd found far from Elk Hollow. Success that Louise and I had sacrificed everything to help them achieve. I drove to Red River Fix-It Garage, the auto shop I'd co-owned with my friend Ray for over 30 years. It was closed today, Ray's concession to my grief, but I still had keys. The garage had always been my sanctuary, a place where problems had clear solutions, a part replaced, a belt tightened, an engine tuned. Inside, the familiar smells of motor oil and rubber wrapped around me like an old friend's embrace. I sat at my cluttered desk in the back office and pulled out Mara's number. My hands trembled as I dialed. She answered on the second ring, her voice tense. "Mr. Bennet?" "Call me Harold," I said. "I need to understand what you told me yesterday. It sounds impossible." "I know." She sighed heavily. "I'm still trying to process it myself. Where are you now? Are you alone?" "At my garage." "Yes, I'm alone." "Good. We shouldn't meet at your house or anywhere your sons might see us together." She paused. "There's a diner off Highway 16, Maggie's place. Do you know it? Been going there for breakfast every Sunday for 20 years. Can you meet me there in an hour?" I agreed and hung up, my mind flooding with memories of Louise and me in that very diner, sharing pancakes and dreams across decades. The thought that she might still be alive somewhere, confused and afraid, made my chest tighten with both hope and horror. Before leaving the garage, I unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk and retrieved the small album Louise had insisted I keep there. "For the days when work gets hard," she'd said. I flipped through photos of our life together, our wedding day in 1980, the boys as toddlers, vacations at Lake Hartwell, the day we paid off the mortgage. My fingers stopped at a photo taken just 6 months ago. Louise in the garden she loved, her silver-streaked auburn hair catching the light, her smile as radiant as ever at 67. I studied her face, memorizing every line and freckle. If someone else had been buried in her place, I needed to be certain I could spot the differences. At Maggie's place, I chose a booth in the back corner with a clear view of the entrance. The diner was nearly empty, a Tuesday morning lull. Maggie, herself now in her 70s but still running the register, nodded at me sympathetically as I passed. "Coffee's on the house today, Harold," she said, her voice gentle. "So sorry about Louise." I thanked her, guilt washing over me. What if Louise wasn't dead? What if I was giving in to some paranoid fantasy born of grief? The rational part of me argued that dead was dead. There had been a certificate, a funeral, a burial, yet something deeper, something connected to 43 years of knowing and loving one woman, whispered that Mara might be telling the truth. The bell above the door jingled. Mara entered, scanning the diner nervously before spotting me. She slid into the booth across from me, removing her jacket to reveal a nurse's scrubs underneath. "I came straight from my shift," she explained, accepting the coffee the waitress poured for her. She waited until we were alone again before continuing. "I need to explain how I know Louise. You said you knew her cousin?" "Yes, Martha Wilkins. I was her hospice nurse last year when she was dying of pancreatic cancer. Louise visited her every day." Mara's eyes softened. She'd read to Martha for hours, even when Martha was too far gone to respond. "That's the kind of person your wife is." Is, not was. The simple present tense sent a jolt through me. "Martha left Louise some family heirlooms," Mara continued. "Nothing valuable, just sentimental things. Louise showed them to me once when I commented on a brooch she was wearing. We kept in touch after Martha passed. Just Christmas cards mostly." "And you're saying you saw her after she supposedly died?" Mara nodded, her hands tightening around her coffee mug. 3 days after her accident. I was making a house call to a patient who lives out on Old Mill Road. The property next door is a rental, one of those secluded cabins. I saw a woman on the porch just for a moment. She looked confused, disoriented. But it was her. Harold. It was Louise. "Did she see you? Did you speak to her?" "No, a man came out and led her back inside before she spotted me. I didn't recognize him. Not one of your sons. Someone older, maybe in his 50s. I leaned forward. "Why would anyone do this? Why would my sons fake their mother's death?" Mara hesitated. "I've been asking myself the same question. Has anything unusual happened recently? Any changes in your family dynamic?" I thought back over the past year. Ethan's increasing interest in our finances. Gavin's questions about the house, its value, its mortgage status. Both of them pressing Louise and me about our wills, our insurance policies. They've been attentive lately, more involved in our affairs than they have been in years. I rubbed my face, feeling the stubble of 2 days without shaving. But to fake their mother's death, that's beyond comprehension. "I did some research after I saw her," Mara said quietly. "There was no ambulance call to your address on the night Louise supposedly fell. No emergency room admission. The death certificate was signed by a doctor I've never heard of, and I know most of the physicians in this county." My mouth went dry. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we find out who's really buried in your wife's grave, and then we find Louise." She reached across the table, covering my weathered hand with her smaller one. "I know this sounds crazy. I know I'm asking you to consider something unthinkable about your own children, but what if I'm right? What if Louise is out there somewhere needing you?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications. If Mara was right, my sons were monsters capable of unimaginable cruelty. If she was wrong, I was entertaining wild conspiracy theories while my wife lay cold in her grave. But Louise's last words to me kept echoing. "If anything ever seems off, don't trust what you see." "Where do we start?" I asked finally. Relief flooded Mara's face. "The death certificate. We need to see exactly what it says and who signed it. Then we need to find out if there's been any activity on Louise's accounts since her death. And the woman in the casket? How do we—" "One step at a time," Mara said gently. "First, we gather evidence. But Harold," her expression grew solemn, "you need to act normal around your sons. If they've done what I think they've done, they're dangerous. They can't know we're investigating. As I drove home, the world around me seemed simultaneously sharper and more dreamlike. The familiar streets of Elk Hollow, the town where Louise and I had built our lives, raised our boys, planned to grow old together, now felt like a stage set for some terrible performance. If Louise was alive, I would find her. If my sons had betrayed us in the most fundamental way possible, I would uncover the truth, and somehow I would find the strength to face whatever came next. For now, though, I had to return home and look into the eyes of my children, wondering if they were also my wife's captors, or worse, her would-be killers. The house was quiet when I returned. Too quiet. I found a note from Ethan on the kitchen counter. Taking care of paperwork downtown. Gavin went to pick up lunch. Rest, Dad. The forced normalcy of it turned my stomach. I went to our bedroom, mine and Louise's, and stood in the doorway, taking in the space we'd shared for decades. Her reading glasses still sat on the nightstand. Her slippers peeked out from under the bed. The cross-stitched pillow she'd made that read, "Love grows best in little houses," remained, perfectly centered on her side of the bed, as if waiting for her return. I moved to her closet and slid the door open. The scent of her lavender sachet washed over me. I ran my fingers across her clothes, counting dresses, blouses, the cardigan I'd given her last Christmas. Everything seemed to be here, which struck me as odd. If Louise had truly fallen to her death unexpectedly, wouldn't she be wearing something from this very closet? Wouldn't that item be missing? I checked her jewelry box next. The pearl earrings her mother had given her were there. So was her wedding band. My heart stuttered. Louise never took off her wedding band. Never. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway jolted me back to reality. I quickly closed the jewelry box and went downstairs, my mind racing with this new revelation. Gavin entered, carrying bags from Elk Hollow Diner. "Hey, Dad, brought your favorite turkey club and sweet potato fries." I forced a smile. "Thanks, son. That's thoughtful." We ate in strained silence at the kitchen table. I watched him carefully, this boy I'd taught to ride a bike and change oil, now a successful attorney with a practice in Atlanta. His hands were clean and manicured, so different from my calloused mechanic's fingers. When had he become this polished stranger? "We need to talk about next steps," Gavin said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Ethan and I think you should consider selling the house." "Selling?" I set down my sandwich. "Your mother and I worked our whole lives for this place." "Exactly. It's too much house for just you. The stairs alone—" He stopped abruptly. "The stairs where Mom supposedly fell?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Gavin's expression shifted subtly. "It was an accident, Dad. A terrible accident. But now you need to think practically." "Practically?" I repeated. "Like how practical it was to have a closed casket, or how practical it was to rush the funeral." His eyes narrowed. "You're grieving. It's normal to look for things that don't make sense when something senseless happens." Before I could respond, Ethan returned. He carried a folder thick with documents and wore the expression I'd seen him use on reluctant clients, sympathetic but determined. "Got everything sorted at the county clerk's office," he announced, setting the folder on the table. "Death certificate, property transfer forms, insurance, paperwork." "Property transfer?" I asked. "Just getting things organized," Ethan said smoothly. "Making sure the house is properly in your name alone now." I nodded, playing along. "May I see the death certificate?" The brothers exchanged a quick glance that might have gone unnoticed if I hadn't been watching for it. "Of course," Ethan said, pulling out a document and sliding it across the table. I studied it carefully. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head and neck consistent with fall. The doctor's signature was barely legible. Dr. Maxwell Thornton. I'd never heard of him. "Who pronounced her dead?" I asked, keeping my tone conversational. "What?" Ethan looked startled. "Who found her? Who called the ambulance? Who pronounced her dead?" I set the certificate down. "I was at work when you called me. By the time I got home, you said she'd already been taken to the morgue." "I found her," Gavin said. "I'd stopped by to drop off those estate planning documents we'd discussed. The front door was unlocked. I called out, but no one answered. Then I saw her at the bottom of the stairs." His voice cracked convincingly. "I called 911, then Ethan, then you. I studied my younger son's face, searching for signs of deception. The paramedics pronounced her. Dad, does it matter? She was gone." Ethan's tone hardened. "Why are you fixating on these details?" Because your mother might still be alive, I wanted to scream. Because the woman I've loved since I was 25 might be held somewhere against her will, while a stranger occupies her grave. Instead, I said, just trying to understand what happened while I wasn't here. That evening, after my sons had retreated to their rooms to make work calls, I slipped into the home office Louise and I shared. Her desk remained untouched, a stack of library newsletters, a mug of pens, a reading journal. I checked the drawer where we kept important documents and found it unlocked and emptier than it should have been. Our wills were missing. So was our life insurance policy. I powered up our ancient desktop computer and opened Louise's email account. Her password had always been the same, Be Kind 1957, her motto and birth year. To my surprise, it still worked. What I found chilled me. An email from 3 weeks ago sent to a law office I didn't recognize. Have concerns about son's intentions. Need to speak. Privately about changing will and power of attorney. Urgent. Another email sent to her closest friend Judith. Need to talk. Not on phone. Can you meet tomorrow? Don't tell anyone. The last email in her sent folder was dated the day before her accident, addressed to someone called mfieldselkhollerhospice.org. Thank you for the information. We'll proceed as discussed. If anything happens to me, please contact Harold directly. Mara Fields. Louise had been in contact with Mara. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly closed the email and shut down the computer. Seconds later, Ethan appeared in the doorway. Everything okay, Dad? It's getting late. Just reminiscing, I said, gesturing to the photos on the wall. Family vacations, graduation ceremonies, the four of us smiling for the camera. Had those smiles been genuine? Had my sons always harbored this capacity for betrayal, or had something changed them? You should get some sleep, Ethan said, his tone gentle but his eyes watchful. Gavin and I are heading back to Atlanta tomorrow afternoon, but we'll check in regularly, and we've arranged for Mrs. Peterson from church to stop by daily, to check on me, to report back, to make sure I wasn't asking questions. That's thoughtful, I lied. I think I will turn in. In bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind whirling with fragments of evidence. Louise's wedding ring in her jewelry box, the missing documents, the emails to Mara. Each piece pointed to a horrifying conclusion. My sons had done something unthinkable to their mother, and I had nearly been fool enough to believe their performance of grief. I waited until the house was silent before slipping out of bed. Moving quietly, I gathered essentials: wallet, phone, jacket, the photo of Louise from my bedside table. I crept down the back stairs and out to the garage, where my truck waited. As I backed down the driveway, headlights off until I reached the street, one thought pounded in my mind. Find Louise. Save her, before it's too late. I drove straight to Mara's address, a small apartment above the pharmacy on Main Street. She answered my urgent knock in flannel pajamas, her eyes widening at my disheveled appearance. Harold? What's happened? Louise knew, I said, pushing past her into the apartment. She knew something was wrong. She emailed you the day before she disappeared. Mara's face paled. Come sit down. Her apartment was sparsely furnished but neat, a nurse's efficiency evident in the organized bookshelves and precisely arranged furniture. She guided me to a small kitchen table and put on a kettle for tea. I didn't tell you everything earlier, she admitted, sitting across from me. Louise contacted me about 3 weeks ago. She was worried about your son's behavior, asking strange questions about your finances, suggesting she update her will, discussing the value of your house. Why you? Why not tell me? She was afraid of being dismissed as paranoid. She said you always saw the best in your boys. Mara's expression softened. She didn't want to come between you and your sons without solid evidence. The kettle whistled. Mara poured 2 mugs of tea and continued. She asked me to help her document everything. Changes to financial documents, unusual visits, conversations that made her uncomfortable. She was building a case. A case for what? I'm not entirely sure. Mara hesitated. But the last time we spoke, she mentioned looking into nursing homes in the area. Not for either of you to live in. She was researching their ownership records, their patient protocols. My confusion must have shown on my face. Harold, I think she suspected your sons were planning to have you both declared incompetent, to take control of your assets. The room seemed to tilt around me. That's why they wanted us to update our wills. That's why they kept suggesting we might need help managing the house. Mara nodded grimly. The life insurance policy was probably their backup plan. If they couldn't get you declared incompetent, they'd collect on your deaths. But why fake Louise's death? Why not just— I couldn't finish the sentence. Kill her outright. Mara's voice was gentle. Maybe they needed time. Maybe they needed to establish a pattern of her being accident-prone first. Or maybe they couldn't bring themselves to murder her directly, so they found a different way. I thought of the rental cabin where Mara had glimpsed Louise. We need to find that property on Old Mill Road. First light, Mara agreed, but not in your truck. They might be looking for it by now. We spent the night planning. Mara called in sick for her morning shift while I dozed fitfully on her couch. By dawn, we had a strategy. Borrow her colleague's car, drive out to Old Mill Road, and conduct surveillance on the rental property. If we saw Louise, we'd call the police immediately. If not, we'd gather whatever evidence we could find. At first light, we set out in a battered Honda belonging to another hospice nurse. The morning was misty, the world washed in grey as we wound through the back roads of Elk Hollow. Old Mill Road was on the outskirts of town, a winding lane dotted with weathered mailboxes and long driveways disappearing into the trees. There, Mara pointed to a gravel drive marked only by a small sign reading Pine View Cabin. We parked a quarter-mile down the road and approached on foot, keeping to the tree line. The cabin was smaller than I'd expected, a one-story structure with a covered porch. A dark sedan sat in the driveway. "That's not Ethan's or Gavin's car," I whispered. "Hired help, maybe," Mara suggested. We crept closer, staying low in the underbrush. The cabin windows were covered with heavy curtains. No movement, no sound. "Let's circle around," I suggested. We made our way through the woods, approaching the back of the property. Here, one window was partially uncovered. I inched forward, heart pounding, and peered inside. The room was sparsely furnished. A bed, a chair, a small table. Medical equipment stood against one wall. An IV stand, a heart monitor, an oxygen tank. But the bed was empty, the sheets rumpled as if recently vacated. "They've moved her," I whispered, despair washing over me. Mara squeezed my arm. "Let's check inside. There might be something to tell us where they've taken her." We found the back door unlocked, a careless oversight that gave me a flicker of hope. Inside, the cabin smelled of antiseptic and something else, Louise's lavender lotion. My heart clenched. "She was here," I said, picking up a bottle from the bathroom counter. "This is her brand. She orders it special from a shop in Savannah." We searched quickly, conscious of the risk. In the bedside table, I found a notebook filled with medical notations, temperature readings, medication dosages, timestamps. "Lorazepam," Mara read over my shoulder. "Enough to keep her sedated but conscious. And look at these timestamps. Someone's been checking on her every 4 hours." In the kitchen, we found more evidence. A prescription bottle with Louise's name dated 3 days after her supposed death. The prescribing: Dr. Maxwell Thornton, the same name on her death certificate. "We need to find this doctor," I said, pocketing the bottle. As we prepared to leave, headlights swept across the front of the cabin. A car was coming up the drive. "Back door," Mara hissed. We slipped out just as we heard a car door slam. Through the trees, I caught a glimpse of a man in scrubs entering the cabin. Not my sons, but someone they'd hired, someone who might lead us to Louise. "We need to follow him when he leaves," I whispered. For 2 agonizing hours, we waited in the woods, mosquitoes feasting on our exposed skin, the humidity making my shirt cling to my back. Finally, the man emerged, carrying a medical bag. He locked the cabin and drove away. We followed at a distance in Mara's friend's car, staying just close enough to keep his sedan in sight. He led us not toward town, but deeper into the county, eventually turning onto a private road marked Shady Pines Care Center. "I know this place," Mara said, her voice tight. "It's one of those under-the-radar nursing homes that takes patients with minimal paperwork, cash only, few questions asked. Perfect for hiding someone who's legally dead," I said, grimly. We parked on a service road and approached the facility on foot. Unlike the well-maintained nursing homes in town, Shady Pines looked neglected. Peeling paint, overgrown landscaping, windows covered with metal grates rather than curtains. "How do we get in?" I asked. Mara straightened her scrubs. "Follow my lead. Act like you belong." Mara adjusted her ID badge, turning it backward so only the lanyard showed. "Keep your head down, walk with purpose," she instructed as we approached the side entrance of Shady Pines. A bored-looking security guard barely glanced up from his phone as Mara nodded professionally and swiped her badge against the card reader. It didn't activate the lock, of course, but when she tried the handle, we discovered the door was already unlocked. A violation of protocol that made me wonder what other standards Shady Pines ignored. Inside, the facility smelled of bleach, barely masking something more unpleasant. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow across the institutional green walls. A nurse's station stood empty at the junction of two hallways. "Patient rooms will be down there," Mara whispered, pointing to the corridor on the right. "Administrator's office likely to the left." "We should split up," I suggested. "No." Mara's hand tightened on my arm. "If she's here, you'll need me to help assess her condition." We moved down the right hallway, passing rooms with partially open doors. Inside, I glimpsed elderly patients, some sleeping, others staring vacantly at muted televisions. No Louise. At the end of the hall, a heavy door marked Special Care Unit blocked our path. This one required an actual keycard. "Now what?" I whispered. Before Mara could answer, a voice behind us made us freeze. "Can I help you find something?" We turned to face a stern-looking woman in administrative scrubs, her arms crossed over her clipboard. Mara stepped forward smoothly. "Dr. Thornton asked us to check on the new admission. In special care. Patient transfer from Pineview." I held my breath, watching the administrator's face for any reaction to the doctor's name. Her expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. "Dr. Thornton didn't inform me of any visit today." "Last minute," Mara said apologetically. "The patient's condition has been fluctuating. He's concerned about the medication." "Protocol." The administrator studied us for a long moment. I forced myself to meet her gaze steadily, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "I'll need to see some ID," she said finally. "Of course." Mara reached for her badge, then patted her pockets with a convincing show of dismay. "I must have left it in the car. Would you like me to go get it, or would you prefer to call Dr. Thornton?" "Directly. I'm sure he'd be happy to verify our visit, though he mentioned he was heading into surgery this morning." The implied inconvenience of bothering a surgeon did its work. The administrator sighed, then swiped her own card against the reader. "Make it quick. I'll need to accompany you." The special care unit contained just 6 rooms, each with a window in the door for observation. The parquet. Administrator led us to the last room on the left. 10 minutes, she said firmly. "I'll be at the desk." As soon as she walked away, we peered through the window. My knees nearly buckled at what I saw. Louise lay in a hospital bed, her silver-streaked auburn hair spread across the pillow. She was thinner than I remembered, her skin waxy under the harsh lights. An IV dripped clear fluid into her arm. Her eyes were closed, but her chest rose and fell with steady breaths. "She's alive," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "My God, she's alive!" Mara checked the hallway before quietly opening the door. We slipped inside, and I rushed to Louise's bedside, taking her limp hand in mine. "Louise, sweetheart, it's me, it's Harold." No response. Her hand felt cool, her fingers unresponsive. "She's heavily sedated," Mara said, checking the IV bag. "Lorazepam, just like in the cabin. Enough to keep her compliant but conscious." She examined Louise's eyes, gently lifting each lid. "Pupils responsive. That's good." I stroked Louise's cheek, my throat tight with emotion. "Can we wake her? Can we take her out of here?" "Not safely, not right now." Mara's voice was gentle but firm. "She needs to be weaned off these medications gradually. And we need a plan. If we just take her, your sons will know immediately." "I don't care," I growled. "They can't get away with this." "And they won't," Mara promised. "But we need to be smart. We need evidence that will hold up in court." She was right, of course. Removing Louise now would alert Ethan and Gavin, giving them time to destroy evidence and create a counter-narrative, perhaps claiming I had kidnapped a vulnerable patient in my grief-induced delusion. "What's our next step?" I asked, still clutching Louise's hand, as if letting go might make her disappear again. "We document everything," Mara said, already taking photos with her phone, the IV setup, the chart at the foot of Louise's bed, the medications on the side table. "Then we go straight to Sheriff Michaels." The mention of local law enforcement gave me pause. What if the sheriff doesn't believe us? What if my sons have already spoken to him, painted me as a grieving old man losing his mind? "Then we go to the state police," Mara said firmly, "or the FBI. This crosses multiple jurisdictions: insurance fraud, kidnapping, possibly attempted murder. Someone will... Listen! A sound in the hallway made us both freeze. Footsteps approached, then passed the door. "We need to go," Mara whispered. "We have what we need for now." I leaned down and pressed my lips to Louise's forehead. "I'm coming back for you," I promised. "Hold on, sweetheart, just hold on." We slipped out of the room and down the hall, nodding to the administrator as we passed the desk. She watched us suspiciously but said nothing as we exited through the same side door we'd entered. Once in the car, Mara drove quickly but carefully away from Shady Pines, constantly checking the rearview mirror for any sign of pursuit. "The sheriff's station?" she asked. I hesitated, a new fear taking root. "Not yet. We need more. We need to understand exactly what they've done, what they're planning." "Harold, my son's buried someone in my wife's place," I interrupted, the reality of it still staggering. "Who was in that casket? How deep does this go? Before we involve the authorities, I need to know everything." Mara considered this, then nodded reluctantly. "Where to, then?" "My house," I decided. "Ethan and Gavin should be gone by now, headed back to Atlanta. I need to search. Their rooms, their belongings. There might be something there to tell us how far they're willing to go." The house was quiet when we arrived, no sign of my son's vehicles. Still, we approached cautiously, using the back door that opened into the kitchen. Inside, everything looked normal, too normal, as if staged for a real estate showing rather than a home in mourning. I moved quickly to Ethan's old room, now used as a guest room when the boys visited. Under the mattress I found nothing. The dresser drawers contained only neatly folded clothes. The closet held a garment bag with Ethan's suit. "Check the pockets," Mara suggested. In the inside pocket of Ethan's suit jacket I found a business card. "Maxwell Thornton, MD, private medical consultant." On the back, handwritten numbers. 250K split, 30% up front. 250,000, Mara breathed. "The insurance policy?" "Must be," I agreed grimly. "Split between them, with 30% going to this doctor for his part in the scheme." In Gavin's room, we found more evidence. A burner phone hidden in a sock, a file folder containing what appeared to be forged power of attorney documents with my signature, and a notebook filled with timelines and payment schedules. One entry made my blood run cold. H next. Accident or natural causes. They were planning to kill me next. "We have enough," Mara said, her face pale. "We need to go to the sheriff now." As we gathered the evidence, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway froze us in place. Through the bedroom window, I saw Ethan's BMW. "They came back," whispered. "Why would they come back?" Mara's eyes widened. "The tracker. They must have put a tracker on your truck." We had parked my truck in the garage upon returning, thinking it would be less visible there. Instead, it had led my sons straight back to the house. "Back door," I said urgently, stuffing the evidence into my pockets. "Now." We hurried down the hallway, but before we could reach the kitchen, the front door opened. Ethan's voice called out, "Dad, you home?" There was nowhere to go. We were trapped. "Bathroom," I mouthed to Mara, pointing to the half bath off the kitchen. She slipped inside while I moved toward the front of the house, composing my face into what I hoped was a convincing mask of normalcy. "There you are," Ethan said, spotting me in the hallway. "We were worried when we saw your truck in the garage, but you didn't answer your phone." "Sorry," I said, patting my empty pockets. "Must have left it somewhere. I thought you boys were heading back to Atlanta." Gavin appeared behind his brother, eyes narrowing slightly as he studied my face. "Change of plans. We decided to stay another day, make sure you're settled." "That's thoughtful," I managed. "I was just about to make some coffee. Join me?" In the kitchen, I busied myself with the coffee maker, trying to appear casual while my mind raced. The bathroom where Mara hid was just steps away, if either of my sons needed to use it. "So where were you this morning?" Ethan asked, leaning against the counter. His tone was conversational, but his eyes were watchful. "Just driving," I said vaguely. "Needed to clear my head." "Driving where?" Gavin pressed. I shrugged. "Nowhere special. Out by the lake, the old spots your mother and I used to go." Ethan and Gavin exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Dad," Ethan said, his voice softening, "we're concerned about you. This behavior, disappearing without telling anyone, driving around aimlessly, it's not like you. Grief affects people differently." I replied, pouring coffee into mugs. I'm just trying to process everything. Of course, Gavin said soothingly. That's why we think it might be good for you to talk to someone professional. Dr. Whitman recommended a grief counselor who specializes in cases like yours. Cases like mine. Sudden loss, Ethan clarified. Traumatic circumstances. She could help you accept what's happened. Accept the lie, they meant. Accept that my wife was dead when she was actually imprisoned just miles away, drugged and helpless. I'll think about it, I said, handing them each a mug of coffee. Gavin took a sip, then set his mug down carefully. There's something else we wanted to discuss. The insurance company called this morning. There's an issue with Mom's policy. My pulse quickened. What kind of issue? Just a formality, Ethan assured me. They need a more detailed cause of death than what's on the certificate. Dr. Thornton is going to amend it. Thornton? I repeated, watching their faces. I don't remember meeting him at the hospital. Another glance between them. You were in shock, Gavin said. He was very helpful, very understanding about the whole situation. I'm sure he was, I murmured, for his 30%. The kitchen went silent. Ethan's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. What did you say? Nothing, I backpedaled. Just thinking out loud. No. Gavin's voice had lost all its artificial sympathy. You said 30%. What did you mean by that, Dad? Before I could answer, the bathroom door creaked. 3 heads turned. Toward the sound, Mara stepped out, chin raised, eyes defiant. He meant that Dr. Thornton gets 30% of the insurance money for falsifying Louise's death certificate. Isn't that right, boys? Ethan recovered first, his expression sliding from shock to calculated calm. Dad, who is this woman? What is she doing in our house? This is Mara Fields, I said, moving to stand beside her. She's a friend of your mother's, and she saw Louise alive 3 days after you claimed she died. Gavin laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dad, this is exactly what we've been worried about. You're not thinking clearly. This woman is taking advantage of your grief. We found her, Mara said bluntly, at Shady Pines, room 106 in the special care unit, still alive, though heavily sedated. The brothers' faces changed subtly, a tightening around Ethan's eyes, a muscle jumping in Gavin's jaw. This is ridiculous, Ethan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Dad, this woman has clearly fed you some conspiracy theory that you're latching onto because the truth is too painful to accept. The truth, I repeated, anger finally breaking through my fear. The truth is that my own sons, the boys your mother and I sacrificed everything for, tried to murder her for insurance money. And when that didn't work, you locked her away and buried someone else in her place. Who was in the casket? Mara demanded. Some Jane Doe from the morgue? A homeless woman no one would miss? Gavin's expression hardened. You need help, Dad, both of you do. Making wild accusations like this, it only proves how unstable you've become. We have evidence, I said, reaching into my pocket for the documents we'd found. Ethan moved with surprising speed, grabbing my wrist. No, Dad. What you have is a woman manipulating you and your own grief-induced delusions. He turned to Gavin. Call Dr. Whitman, tell him it's an emergency. You're not calling anyone, Mara said firmly, pulling out her phone. Except maybe Sheriff Michaels. I've documented everything, the cabin, the nursing home, Louise's condition, the medications. It's over. For a moment, I thought they might attack us physically. Ethan's grip on my wrist tightened painfully. Gavin's eyes darted around the kitchen as if searching for a weapon. Then, abruptly, Ethan released me and stepped back, his face smoothed into the practiced smile I'd seen him use on reluctant clients. Fine, he said. Let's all calm down. Obviously, there's been a misunderstanding. Why don't we sit down in the living room and discuss this rationally? The sudden shift in tactics alarmed me more than their anger had. No more discussions, I said. We're going to the sheriff. At least let me get my briefcase from the car, Gavin said. I have documentation that will clear this all up. We're not letting either of you out of our sight, Mara stated. Gavin's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then we'll all go out together. No sudden moves, just a calm walk to the car to get my papers. Then we can all drive to the sheriff's station together. Would that work? I hesitated, sensing a trap, but unable to see it clearly. Before I could decide, the sound of another vehicle pulling into the driveway distracted us all. Through the kitchen window, I saw Sheriff Michael's patrol car parking behind Ethan's BMW. Relief washed over me, until I saw Dr. Whitman emerge from the passenger side. You called them before you came back, I realized, the pieces falling into place. You were already setting this up. Ethan's smile widened. We've been worried about your mental state for weeks, Dad. Dr. Whitman has the paperwork ready for an emergency psychiatric hold, for your own protection, of course. And your hospice nurse friend? Gavin added, nodding toward Mara. Trespassing, elder exploitation. Sheriff Michaels will be very interested in her story. The front doorbell rang. We were out of time. Mara grabbed my arm. Back door, now. We bolted, even as Ethan shouted behind us, Dad, stop, you're only making this worse. We burst out the back door and ran for the woods behind the house. I'd played in these woods as a boy, taught my sons to hunt in them as young men. I knew every path, every hiding spot. This way, I gasped to Mara, pulling her toward a deer trail barely visible among the underbrush. Behind us, I heard the sheriff's voice. Harold Bennett, stop where you are. We ran deeper into the woods, branches whipping at our faces, roots threatening to trip us at every step. My 69-year-old lungs burned. My knees protested each impact, but fear and rage pushed me forward. Where are we going? Mara panted beside me. Ray's hunting cabin, I managed between breaths. 2 miles north. They won't know about it. As we pushed through the dense forest, one thought sustained me. Louise was alive, and no matter what it took, I would save her from our sons and the nightmare they had created. The hunting cabin came into view just as my legs threatened to give out. A simple one-room structure Ray and I had built 20 years ago. It sat nestled among towering pines, nearly invisible, until you were. Right upon it, perfect for hiding from sons who had never shown interest in their father's hunting trips. Almost there, I wheezed to Mara, who looked as exhausted as I felt, her scrubs torn and muddy from our desperate flight through the woods. I retrieved the key from its hiding place under a false rock and unlocked the door with trembling hands. Inside, the cabin was exactly as Ray and I had left it after last year's deer season. Spartan but functional, with a wood stove, 2 cots, a small table, and shelves stocked with canned goods and emergency supplies. They'll be searching for us, Mara said, collapsing onto one of the cots. Your sons, the sheriff, they'll have the whole county looking. Not here, I assured her, securing the door and windows. Nobody knows about this place, except Ray and me, and Ray's in Florida visiting his daughter. I filled 2 cups with water from the rainwater collection system and handed one to Mara. We drank in silence, the magnitude of our situation settling over us like a heavy blanket. We need a plan, Mara finally said. We can't hide forever, and Louise is still at Shady Pines. I nodded, rubbing my face with weathered hands. The sheriff thinks I'm having a breakdown. My own sons have convinced him I'm delusional, and Dr. Whitman has paperwork for an emergency psychiatric hold, Mara added grimly. If they find us, they'll lock you away and discredit anything you say. While Louise... I couldn't finish the thought. What would happen to my wife once Ethan and Gavin realized their plan was compromised? Would they move? Her again? Or worse? We need proof they can't ignore, Mara said, her practical nurse's mind already working on solutions. Photos and documentation might not be enough, especially if they've already painted me as some kind of manipulative con woman. I paced the small cabin, thinking, we need to get Louise out of Shady Pines. If the sheriff sees her alive, sees her condition, he'll have to believe us. Breaking her out won't be easy, Mara warned, and moving her while she's still heavily medicated could be dangerous. What choice do we have? I stopped pacing, a new determination hardening my voice. My sons are trying to have me committed. They've already killed and buried my wife. If we don't act now, they'll succeed in silencing both of us. Mara considered this, then nodded, reluctantly. We'll need help. Someone with authority who might believe us despite the odds. Ray's son-in-law is a state trooper in Florida, I offered. If I could reach him, explain what's happening. Anyone local. Someone who knew Louise well enough to identify her without question. I thought about our circle of friends, neighbors, colleagues, people who had attended Louise's funeral with genuine grief. Who among them would be willing to believe such an outlandish story? Who would risk their reputation on the word of a supposedly unstable old man? Judith Wilson, I said suddenly. Louise's best friend for 30 years. She's a retired judge. If anyone would listen, it would be her. The one Louise emailed about her concerns, Mara recalled. Do you have her number? Better, I said, moving to the shelf where we kept emergency supplies. There's a satellite phone here. Ray insisted on it after that hunter got lost in 19. We can call her without using our cell phones, which they might be tracking. The call to Judith was brief, but intense. At first disbelieving, then cautiously open to the possibility, she finally agreed to meet us at the cabin after I mentioned the email Louise had sent her before disappearing. 2 hours, I told Mara after hanging up. She'll be here in 2 hours. While we waited, I inventoried our resources. The cabin contained enough food and water for several days. A first aid kit, flashlights, and locked in a gun cabinet, Ray's hunting rifles. We're not shooting anyone, Mara said firmly, seeing me eye the cabinet. Of course not, I agreed quickly. But Judith should know we're serious. The hours crawled by. Every distant sound, a branch breaking, an animal moving through the underbrush, sent us into momentary panic. But no sheriff's deputies appeared. No search parties called my name. When Judith finally arrived, her knock on the door nearly gave me a heart attack, despite being expected. I peered through a crack before letting her in, a precaution that seemed to impress her. "Harold Bennett," she said, taking in my disheveled appearance with sharp eyes that had once presided over the county courthouse. "You look like hell." "It's been a difficult few days," I replied dryly. Judith turned to Mara. "And you're the hospice nurse? The one who claims to have seen Louise alive?" "I don't claim anything," Mara said. Evenly. "I saw her. We both did. At Shady Pines Care Center." Judith's expression remained skeptical but not dismissive. "Show me what you have." We laid out our evidence. The photos Mara had taken at Shady Pines. The prescription bottle with Louise's name dated after her supposed death. The business card with the payment notation. The notebook with its ominous entry about my planned accident. "This is somewhat disturbing," Judith admitted, examining each item carefully. "But it's circumstantial. Why would Ethan and Gavin do this? They've both got successful careers, money of their own." "The house," I explained, "and Louise's life insurance, $250,000. They've been pushing us to update our wills, asking about the property value. The insurance was just the beginning." "They wanted it all," Mara added. "The house, the insurance, Harold's garage business, and they didn't want to wait for natural causes." Judith sat back, her judicial mask slipping to reveal the friend who had shared holidays and backyard barbecues with us for decades. "Louise had concerns," she admitted. "In her email she mentioned feeling unsafe, but I thought she was being paranoid. She asked to meet, but then she trailed off, guilt clouding her features. I was busy with my grandchildren visiting. I told her we could talk the following week. Then I got the call that she died." "She didn't die," I said firmly. "She was taken, and she's still alive, still being held against her will." Judith closed her eyes briefly, processing. When she opened them, the judge had returned. "All right, if, and I stress if, what you're saying is true, we need to do this by the book. We need irrefutable evidence and proper authorities." "Sheriff Michaels thinks I'm having a breakdown," I reminded her. "He's working with my sons." "Then we go above him," Judith decided. "I still have contacts at the state level, people who will take my call and listen without prejudice." She checked her watch. "But first we need to confirm. Louise is where you say she is. If they've moved her, we have to go back to Shady Pines," Mara concluded. "Tonight." Judith nodded. "I'll drive. My car won't be recognized. And I'll make some calls on the way, quietly, to get the right people involved." As dusk fell, we finalized our plan. Judith would drive us to Shady Pines under cover of darkness. Mara, with her medical knowledge, would lead us to Louise. I would identify my wife beyond any doubt, and Judith would document everything, providing the legal weight we needed to be believed. "What if they've already moved her?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "Then we follow the trail," Judith said with quiet determination. "I didn't believe Louise when she needed me. I won't fail her again." As we prepared to leave the cabin, I tucked a small photo into my pocket. Louise and me on our 40th anniversary, her smile radiant as she leaned against my shoulder. I touched it like a talisman. "Hold on, sweetheart," I whispered. "We're coming." Shady Pines looked different in darkness, more sinister, its peeling paint and barred windows transformed into something from a nightmare. We parked Judith's Volvo a quarter-mile away and approached on foot, keeping to the shadows. "Security will be minimal at night," Mara explained in a whisper. "Usually just one guard at the front entrance and a skeleton nursing staff. Most places like this cut corners after hours." "How do we get in?" Judith asked, her judicial confidence somewhat diminished by the reality of our breaking and entering plan. Same way as before, Mara said. Side? Entrance. It was unlocked this morning. Let's hope their security is still lax. The side door was indeed unlocked, a small mercy in a situation that offered few. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit, most patient rooms dark, except for the glow of nightlights. We moved silently, Mara leading the way toward the special care unit. At the nurse's station, a middle-aged woman dozed in her chair, a romance novel open on her lap. We froze, pressing against the wall, barely breathing until her soft snores resumed. The card reader, I whispered, pointing to the door that separated us from the special care unit. And Louise. Judith produced a plastic card from her pocket. Borrowed from an old colleague who sits on the state licensing board for care facilities. It should override their system. We watched anxiously as she swiped the card. A moment of suspense, then a soft click as the door unlocked. We slipped through quickly before it could close behind us. The special care unit was eerily quiet, the only sounds the hum of medical equipment and the occasional beep of monitors. Room 106, where we'd found Louise that morning, was at the end of the hallway. My heart pounded painfully as we approached. What if she wasn't there? What if they'd already moved her, buried her for real this time? Mara checked through the window first, then turned to me with tears in her eyes. She's still here. I nearly collapsed with relief. Judith steadied me, her own expression a mixture of shock and determination. Let's get her out of here. Inside the room, Louise lay just as we'd left her, that morning, pale, thin but alive. The steady rise and fall of her chest was the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. Louise, I whispered, taking her hand. Louise, sweetheart. It's Harold. I've come to take you home. No response. Her eyes remained closed, her breathing unchanged. The sedation, Mara explained, already checking the IV. They've got her on a continuous drip. We need to disconnect it. Carefully, while Mara worked on the medical equipment, Judith took photos with her phone documenting everything. Louise's condition, the medication labels, the chart at the foot of the bed, with its damning timeline of administered drugs. Her official cause of death was blunt force trauma, Judith noted, examining the chart. But there's no evidence of any injuries here. Because she never fell. Down any stairs, I said grimly. They made it all up. Mara finished disconnecting the IV, leaving the needle in place but stopping the flow of sedatives. It will take time for her to regain consciousness, she warned. We can't wait here. We need to move her now, Judith agreed. Once she's safe, we'll contact the state attorney's office. I've already texted my former clerk. She's standing by. For our evidence, getting Louise out of the bed was a challenge. She was dead weight in our arms, unresponsive but breathing steadily. Mara found a wheelchair in the hallway, and together we carefully transferred Louise into it, covering her with a blanket from the bed. Act natural, Mara instructed as we approached the exit. If anyone stops us, I'm transferring a patient for tests. Judith, you're the family member. Harold, stay slightly behind. Your face might be recognized. We moved through the special care unit door, past the still sleeping nurse, and down the main corridor without incident. The night's silence worked in our favor, the skeleton crew too busy or too disinterested to question our presence. At the side entrance, I held my breath as we pushed through the door into the cool night air. No alarms sounded, no shouts followed us. We had done it. Getting Louise into Judith's car required all our strength. She moaned softly as we settled her across the back seat, her head in my lap. That's it, sweetheart, I encouraged, stroking her hair. Come back to us. We drove away from Shady Pines with relief that quickly turned to vigilance. Judith took a circuitous route, back to the main road, watching for any sign of pursuit. Where to? She asked. We can't go to your house or mine. They'll look there first. The cabin again? Mara suggested. I shook my head. Too remote. If Louise needs medical attention, we'd be too far from help. I have a lake house, Judith offered. About an hour north. It's in my daughter's name, not mine. They wouldn't connect it to us. The decision made, we headed north, taking back roads to avoid the main highway where sheriff's deputies might be patrolling. In my lap, Louise stirred occasionally, her eyelids fluttering but never fully opening. How long until the sedatives wear off? I asked Mara, who was monitoring Louise's pulse and breathing from the front seat. Hard to say. Depends on how long she's been on them, how her body processes the drugs. Could be hours, could be longer. I nodded, continuing to stroke Louise's hair. whispering reassurances I wasn't sure she could hear. After everything we'd been through, raising our sons, building our modest life together, planning for a peaceful retirement, how had we ended up here? Fugitives from our own family, running through the night with evidence of a plot so twisted, I still struggled to comprehend it. The lake house appeared after an hour's drive, a modest A-frame nestled among tall pines, its deck extending over the water. Judith parked around back, out of sight from the access road. "No one's been here since Memorial Day," she explained as we carried Louise inside. "It's basic, but there's running water and electricity." We settled Louise in the A bedroom, Mara checking her vital signs again before covering her with a quilt. "Her color's better," she observed, "and her pulse is stronger. I think she's starting to come around." In the living room, Judith was already at work, sending our evidence to her contacts at the state attorney's office and the Bureau of Elder Affairs. "They're taking it seriously," she reported, "especially with my endorsement. A team is being assembled, but it will take time, probably until morning." "What if Ethan and Gavin realize she's gone before then?" I asked. "What if they try to run? Or worse, what if they come looking for us?" "They won't find us here," Judith assured me, "and I've made sure my contacts understand the urgency. There's an APB out for your son's vehicles, discreetly. If they try to leave the county, they'll be stopped." I nodded, though anxiety still gnawed at me. Too much could still go wrong. Too many people had already failed to protect Louise. A soft sound from the bedroom drew my attention. Louise's voice, weak but unmistakable, calling my name. I rushed to her side, Mara and Judith close behind. Louise's eyes were open, confused but aware, searching the unfamiliar room, until they found my face. "Harold," she whispered, her voice raspy from disuse. "I'm here," I choked out, taking her hand. "I'm right here, sweetheart." "The boys," she managed, fear clouding her eyes. "The boys, we know," I soothed. "We know everything. You're safe now." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "You found me. I'll always find you," I promised, my own tears falling freely. "Always." Mara stepped forward with a glass of water, helping Louise take small sips through a straw. "Easy," she cautioned. "Just a little at a time." Louise complied, her eyes never leaving my face as if afraid I might disappear. When she'd drunk enough, she leaned back against the pillows, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "How did you know?" she asked. "How did you find me?" I glanced at Mara. "Your friend here saw you. She was brave enough to tell me what she saw, even when everyone else thought I was losing my mind." Louise's gaze shifted to Mara, recognition dawning. "Martha's nurse. You got my email?" Mara nodded. "I'm sorry I couldn't help sooner." "You saved me," Louise whispered. "Both of you." Her eyes fluttered, fighting to stay open. "I need to tell you." "What happened?" "Rest first," I urged. "You're still recovering from the drugs." She shook her head weakly but insistently. "No, you need to know, in case they come, in case something happens." I exchanged glances with Judith, who nodded and pulled out her phone. "I'll record this," she said. "Your testimony could be crucial." Louise took a deep breath, gathering what little strength she had. "It started months ago. Little things at first. Ethan asking about the insurance policy. Gavin suggesting we might need help managing the house." Her voice strengthened as she continued, anger providing energy her body lacked. "Then I found the emails." "What emails?" I prompted gently. "On Gavin's laptop. He left it open when he visited in May. Emails between him and Ethan, discussing how to accelerate their inheritance, planning how to have us declared incompetent, or how to stage an accident if that didn't work." My stomach turned at the confirmation of what we'd already suspected. "That's when I started gathering evidence," Louise continued. "I contacted Mara, Judith. I hid copies of our documents. I was going to tell you everything that weekend, Harold, but they came early. Gavin arrived Thursday instead of Friday. He brought tea." Her voice faltered. "The last thing I remember is feeling dizzy, then waking up somewhere strange, with Dr. Thornton standing over me." "The cabin on Old Mill Road," Mara supplied. Louise nodded weakly. "They kept moving me, different places, always drugged. I heard them, talking about the funeral, about burying someone else." Her eyes filled with fresh tears. "Who did they bury, Harold? Whose body is in my grave?" I had no answer to give her, only another question that would need to be answered when justice finally came. Dawn broke over the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and amber. I sat by Louise's bedside watching her sleep, a natural sleep now, not the drug-induced unconsciousness that had held her captive. The gentle rise and fall of her chest, the occasional twitch of her fingers against mine, each movement a miracle I couldn't take for granted. In the kitchen I could hear Judith on the phone, her voice low but authoritative as she coordinated with state authorities. Mara moved quietly around the small house, checking on Louise periodically, brewing coffee, keeping watch at the windows. We were all exhausted but too wired to rest. The adrenaline of the previous day's escape had given way to a vigilant anxiety, waiting for the authorities, waiting for Louise to recover her strength, waiting to see if our sons would somehow track us down before justice could find them. Around 8 o'clock, a convoy of unmarked vehicles appeared on the access road, moving slowly toward the lake house. Mara spotted them first, her body tensing as she peered through the blinds. "They're here," she announced, relief evident in her voice. "State police, looks like. And an ambulance." Judith went out to meet them, ID in hand. Through the window, I watched her speaking with a tall woman in a crisp suit, the state attorney, I presumed, and a pair of stern-looking officers. After a brief conversation, she led them toward the house. I squeezed Louise's hand. "The cavalry's here, sweetheart." Her eyes fluttered open, more alert than they'd been the night before. "Harold, what's happening?" "Help has arrived," I told her. "Real help this time." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Paramedics examined Louise, confirming what Mara had already told us. She was dehydrated, weakened from the sedatives but otherwise physically unharmed. They wanted to transport her to the regional medical center, but Louise refused to leave my side. "I'm not going anywhere without my husband," she insisted, her voice stronger than it had been since we'd found her. "Not after everything we've been through." The state attorney, a formidable woman named Catherine Diaz, compromised by having a doctor come to the lake house. While we waited, she took our statements one by one, recording everything meticulously. "This is one of the most disturbing cases of elder exploitation I've ever encountered," she told us when we'd finished. "And the fact that it was perpetrated by the victim's own children makes it all the more heinous." "Have you found them?" I asked. "Ethan and Gavin." Diaz nodded grimly. "Your sons were apprehended this morning attempting to cross the state line into Georgia. They had packed bags, passports, and a significant amount of cash. Classic flight behavior." "And Dr. Thornton?" Mara asked. "The doctor who falsified the death certificate." "In custody as well. He's already talking, trying to cut a deal." Diaz's expression hardened. "Apparently this isn't the first time. He's been involved in questionable practices. His medical license was suspended in Florida 3 years ago." Louise squeezed my hand. "What about the burial? Who was in my casket?" Diaz exchanged glances with one of the officers before answering. "We've obtained an exhumation order. The process is underway as we speak." She hesitated. "We have reason to believe the deceased may be a woman. Reported missing from a nursing home in Georgia 2 months ago. The facility is owned by a corporation linked to Dr. Thornton." I felt sick at the thought. Not only had my sons tried to kill their mother, but they'd also desecrated another family's loved one in the process. "Will we need to identify her?" Louise asked quietly. "No," Diaz assured us. "DNA testing will confirm her identity. You've both been through enough." The doctor arrived shortly after, a kind-faced woman who examined Louise thoroughly, drew blood for testing, and prescribed fluids and rest. "You're remarkably resilient, Mrs. Bennett," she said, as she packed up her bag. "Most people wouldn't recover so quickly from the cocktail of sedatives you were given." "I had something to fight for," Louise replied, looking at me, with eyes that, despite everything, still held the same love they had for 43 years. By mid-afternoon, the state police had established a protective perimeter around the lake house. Agent Diaz assured us we could stay there until Louise was strong enough to travel, with officers stationed outside for our protection. "Protection from what?" I asked. "If Ethan and Gavin are in custody—" "Standard procedure," she said smoothly, but I caught the glance she exchanged with Judith. There was something they weren't telling us. After Diaz left to coordinate the ongoing investigation, I confronted Judith in the kitchen. "What aren't they saying?" I demanded. "What else is going on?" Judith sighed, looking suddenly every one of her 70 years. "They found evidence on Gavin's phone, text messages to someone named Carson, discussing a backup plan if things went wrong." Carson? As in Carson's funeral home? My blood ran cold. He was involved too? They're investigating that possibility, Judith confirmed. But more importantly, the texts mentioned a contingency if either you or Louise escaped. They're concerned there might be someone else involved, someone still out. The news should have terrified me, but strangely I felt only a weary determination. Let them come, I said quietly. I've found Louise once. No one will take her from me again. That night, as state police officers patrolled the perimeter of the lake house, Louise and I sat on the small deck overlooking the water. She was wrapped in blankets against the evening chill, her hand in mine, her head resting against my shoulder, just as it had countless times throughout our marriage. I still can't believe they would do this, she whispered. Our own sons, Harold. Where did we go wrong? We didn't, I said firmly. We gave them love, values, opportunities. Whatever turned them into the men they became, that was their choice, not our failure. She was quiet for a long moment, watching. The moonlight shimmer across the lake's surface. Do you remember what I used to tell the boys when they were little? About how families are supposed to work? I smiled at the memory. You said, we're like a circle, no beginning, no end, just love going around and around. And Ethan would say it was mathematically impossible, Louise recalled with a sad smile. Always so literal, even then. A loon called somewhere across the water, its mournful cry echoing through the darkness. What happens now? Louise asked finally. After all this, the trial, the publicity, the questions from everyone in town, how do we go back to our lives? Maybe we don't, I suggested. Maybe we start new ones. She looked up at me, curiosity replacing some of the sorrow in her eyes. What do you mean? Remember, that trip to the Oregon coast we always talked about taking. The little seaside towns, the lighthouses, the tide pools. She nodded. Maybe it's time we went. Not just for a visit. Maybe it's time we found a little house overlooking the Pacific where nobody knows us or our story. Run away, you mean? But I could hear the consideration in her voice, the tentative hope. Not running away, I corrected gently. Moving forward, starting fresh, just the two of us. We're not as young as we once were, but we're not done living yet either. Louise was quiet, contemplating. Then she squeezed my hand, her grip stronger than it had been since I'd found her. Oregon has good libraries, I hear, she said, and I imagine they need mechanics there too. I chuckled, feeling something unfurl in my chest, something that felt remarkably like hope. That they do, sweetheart, that they do. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge above the lake. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more revelations, more painful truths about our sons and the depths to which they had sunk. But tonight we had each other, as we had for 43 years, as we would for whatever time we had left. Harold, Louise murmured, half asleep against my shoulder. Yes, love. Thank you for finding me. I pressed a kiss to her silver-streaked hair. I'll always find you, I promised again. Always. 6 months later, I stood on the wooden deck of our small coastal cottage, watching waves crash against the Oregon shoreline. The December air was crisp, but not bitterly cold like Tennessee. Winters, just bracing enough to feel alive with each breath. Coffee's ready, Louise called from inside. Her voice was strong again, her body recovered from the ordeal that now seemed both recent and distant, like a nightmare that fades but never quite disappears. I joined her in our snug kitchen, accepting the steaming mug with a grateful smile. At 70, I'd never imagined starting over in a new state, making new friends, building a different life. Yet here we were, halfway across the country from the town where we'd spent our entire lives. Letter from Judith, Louise said, nodding toward an envelope on the table. And one from Mara, our lifelines to the past. The two women who had helped save Louise when everyone else had written her off as dead. They'd become more than friends. Through our shared ordeal. They were family now in a way our sons had never truly been. I opened Judith's letter first. Her precise handwriting detailed the latest developments in the case against Ethan and Gavin. The trial was scheduled for February. The evidence was overwhelming, not just their plot against Louise, but the identification of the woman they had buried in her place. They found her. Family, I told Louise, reading ahead. The woman in your grave. Her name was Eleanor Winters. 72, suffered from dementia. She'd been reported missing from a nursing home in Atlanta. Louise closed her eyes briefly, a prayer or moment of respect for the stranger who had unknowingly become entangled in our family tragedy. How did they get her? Thornton, I said grimly. He had connections at care facilities across 3 states. He'd been helping wealthy families resolve their elder care problems for years. Eleanor was one of several vulnerable patients who disappeared under suspicious circumstances. The full scope of the conspiracy had emerged over months of investigation. Dr. Maxwell Thornton had built a lucrative side business helping greedy children eliminate inconvenient parents, sometimes through falsified competency assessments that gave the children control of their parents' assets, sometimes through more permanent solutions. Our sons had found him through one of Gavin's legal clients, another child looking to expedite an inheritance. When their initial plan to have us declared incompetent had moved too slowly, they'd opted for Thornton's more direct approach. "What about Carson?" Louise asked. "The funeral director, going to trial separately. He claims he didn't know the body wasn't you, says he just followed instructions for a closed casket service." I shook my head. Judith doesn't believe him, and neither do the prosecutors. The web had extended further than we'd initially realized. The administrator at Shady Pines, a nurse who had helped sedate Louise during transfers. Even our family doctor, who had referred us to Dr. Whitman when Louise first expressed concerns about our son's behavior. All connected, all complicit, all facing charges for their roles in a scheme that had nearly cost Louise her life, and me my sanity. Mara's letter contained happier news. She'd been promoted to Director of Nursing at Elk Hollow Hospice, and was using her position to advocate for better oversight of elder care facilities throughout the state. She'd even testified before the state legislature, helping to draft new regulations that might prevent similar crimes in the future. "She's making something good come from all this," Louise observed, a hint of pride in her voice. "That's a special kind of strength." After breakfast, we bundled up for our daily walk along the beach. Louise linked her arm through mine as we navigated the wooden steps down to the sand. Her gait was steady now, her balance restored after months of physical therapy to counteract the effects of prolonged sedation. The beach was nearly empty on this December morning, just a few dog walkers in the distance and shorebirds hunting at the water's edge. We'd chosen this small coastal town precisely for its quietude, its remove from the media attention that had surrounded us in Tennessee. "Sheriff Michaels lost his re-election," I told Louise, recalling another detail from Judith's letter. "Seems the voters didn't appreciate him helping to cover up an attempted murder." Louise nodded, unsurprised. "And Dr. Whitman? License suspended pending the outcome of the trial. Judith says he's already left the state." We walked in comfortable silence, the rhythm of the waves a soothing backdrop to our thoughts. We rarely spoke of Ethan and Gavin now, not because we were in denial, but because we'd said all there was to say. We had loved them, raised them, sacrificed for them, and they had betrayed that love in the most profound way imaginable. "I had that dream again last night," Louise said suddenly. "The one where I'm in that room at Shady Pines, but the door won't open. I keep calling for you, but no sound comes out." I squeezed her hand. "You're here now. You're safe." "I know." She smiled up at me, the wind tugging at her silver hair. "That's how the dream ends now, with you finding me, just like you promised." We turned around at our usual halfway point, a large driftwood log that resembled a sleeping dragon. As we headed back toward our cottage, I noticed a car parked in our driveway, an unfamiliar sedan with rental plates. Louise felt me tense. "What is it?" "We have visitors," I said, nodding toward the house. We approached cautiously, old fears never quite forgotten. As we drew closer, a woman emerged from the car, tall, professional-looking with a portfolio under her arm. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett," she called. "I'm Rebecca Winters, Eleanor's daughter." The name hit me like a physical blow. Winters, the family of the woman buried in Louise's place. "We're not doing interviews," I said firmly, stepping slightly in front of Louise. "I'm not a reporter," the woman assured us. I needed to meet you, to understand what happened to my mother." Louise touched my arm, her expression soft with compassion. "Let's hear what she has to say, Harold." Inside, over fresh coffee, Rebecca Winters told us about her mother, a kindergarten teacher for 30 years, a passionate gardener, a woman who had loved poetry and classical music before dementia began erasing her memories. The facility told us she had wandered off, Rebecca said, her hands cradling her mug. "It happens with dementia patients. They searched, filed a report, but..." She shook her head. I never imagined something like this. We're so sorry, Louise said gently. For your mother, for what was done to her. Rebecca's eyes welled with tears. That's why I came. Not just to learn about what happened, but to tell you we don't blame you. When I read about the case, about what your sons did to you, she took a steadying breath. Evil touched both our families. I didn't want that to be the end of the story. She opened her portfolio and removed an envelope. These are photos of my mother, from before she got sick. I thought you might want to see the person who was laid to rest in your community. Louise accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Together we looked at photos of Eleanor Winters, smiling with students, tending a vibrant garden, holding Rebecca as a baby. Not just a victim or a body in a casket, but a woman who had lived and loved and mattered. Thank you for this gift, Louise said, her voice thick with emotion, for letting us see her as she really was. After Rebecca left, promising to stay, in touch, Louise and I returned to the deck with fresh coffee, watching the winter sunlight glitter across the Pacific. All this time I've been thinking about what we lost, Louise said reflectively. Our sons, our home, our place in the community we knew all our lives. I nodded, understanding. The cost had been enormous. But today, meeting Rebecca, seeing Eleanor's face, Louise continued, I'm thinking about what we found. What do you mean? We found the truth, Harold. We found justice for Eleanor. We found friends who became family. She reached for my hand. And I found you again, the man who never stopped believing I was out there somewhere. I brought her hand to my lips, pressing a kiss against her knuckles. I'll always find you, I said, the words now a sacred promise. Between us. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long golden rays across the water, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The betrayal, the fear, the desperate search for truth, all of it had led to this moment of quiet peace beside the woman I'd loved for 43 years. Our sons would face justice for their crimes. Eleanor Winters would receive the dignity in death she'd been denied. And Louise and I would continue rebuilding our lives in this small coastal town, finding joy in simple pleasures and strength in each other. What are you thinking? Louise asked, noticing my contemplative silence. I'm thinking about something my father used to say, I replied. The truth may bend, but it never breaks, and in the end, it always finds the light. Louise nodded, understanding flowing between us as it had for decades. The boys thought they could bury the truth along with me. But some things can't stay buried, I said softly. Not the truth, and certainly not love. As dusk settled over the Oregon coast, we sat side by side, survivors of a nightmare transformed into architects of a new beginning. The path forward wasn't always clear, and the shadows of the past would never completely fade. But we had each other, and after everything we'd endured, that seemed like more than enough. Happy anniversary, Harold, Louise whispered, leaning her head against my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her, holding her close as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Happy anniversary, sweetheart. Here's to many more. In the distance, waves continued their eternal rhythm against the shore, a reminder that even after the fiercest storms, peace eventually returns. And sometimes, if you're lucky enough, you find yourself watching that peace with the one person who makes every struggle worthwhile.